Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. So, I'm Adam Hartnell by way of a very short introduction. So, I'm a principal sales engineer here at Buynomics. Before I joined Buynomics, I spent about 12 years in the FMCG industry as an account manager at various levels, working for AB InBev, Unilever, and of course, Pernod Ricard, which is where I met Duncan, the absolute guru of joint business plans himself. So, Duncan, welcome.
Oh, well, I'm not sure about Guru, but I'll do my best today, Adam. Thanks for having me along. A little bit about me. So, Duncan Logan from Pernod Ricard, as you said. I'm a proud Scotsman, but I've been living in London for 10 years now. I used to have some hobbies and some interests, but me and my wife had a child a year ago, so he's kind of taken over our lives, and we're not doing too much. The good news is he's just turned one, so I'm hoping he can take a bit more responsibility around the house, start helping out a bit more, and I can get out and start playing football or tennis or sport. But that does feel like a bit of a pipe dream still. I've been at Pernod Ricard for over 12 years now. Um, got experience in all the different sales channels in the UK market, so on trade, grocery, wholesale, in lots of different elements. And I love working in the drinks industry. I'm really passionate about it. Filled with fantastic people, inspiring stories. It's great to connect, do things like this. It's great to do them online, but it's even better if we can do them over a delicious drink or a cocktail or some food. So, yeah, thanks for having me today and looking forward to the next kind of 30, 45 minutes.
Thanks, Duncan. I can actually confirm that Duncan actually never has had any hobbies, and it's not really fair that he's blaming it on his 1 year old, but I thought I would bring that up. But yeah, Duncan, tell us a little bit about Pernod then.
Nice. Well, before I introduce Perno, and just on the back of that comment, I guess, Adam, I'm going to throw a question at you, which we haven't rehearsed. So, what I would love to know, a bit of fun, and you're not allowed to think about this, first thing that pops into your head.
Right.
If you could be any cocktail, what would you be and why?
Okay. So you're really putting me on the spot, testing my humor as well live, which I appreciate. If I my favorite cocktail, if I was a cocktail.
You were a cocktail, what would you be and why? And yeah, I'd definitely encourage some engagement in the chat as well. I'd love to see some answers in there.
So it has to be something from London. So I would say a Beefeater gin cocktail. Good knowledge of Pernod products. I would say gin and tonic. Probably seems quite refreshing, but actually quite boring in reality. Is that is that a
Nice.
good
That, I
one?
mean, I put you on the spot, but if a gin and tonic is as good as you could come up with, then that's fantastic. I think that sums it up pretty well. Nice. So who are we? Who are we? Puerto Rico, where we are a international spirits and champagne company. We're the number one in premium international spirits. You got some great kind of facts and figures on the slide there. We're in over 160 markets in our kind of biggest brands that hopefully a lot of people on the call will be familiar with are things like Absolute Vodka, Jameson, Glenlivet, Chivas Regal Whiskies, Altos Tequila, Monkey 47, Beefeater Gin, Perrier Jouet Champagne, and a lot of others. So we've got a great portfolio. We kind of operate in the more premium part of the market. And that's what we all about as a company. Well, our kind of ethos is all about conviviality. So a little demonstration there, having a bit of fun with Adam. We like to work very hard, but we like to enjoy ourselves as well. We think it's really important to make time for each other, be curious, value relationships, and it's all about the power of human connection. So, that's who we are, and today's a perfect example. Getting some feedback from the world, and hopefully kind of sharing my experiences. I think it's worth noting that, I work for Pernod Ricard UK, not Pernod Ricard globally. So we only operate in the UK market, not in HQ. And obviously, everything I talk about today will be my own experiences and views.
Cheers, Duncan. And I think that also just to say that between Duncan and I, he's already touched on it, but between us, we've worked in the on trade, off trade, convenience, wholesale, so a number of different channels and retailers. We won't be going too specific on who we've been working with, but of course, we are going to be bringing our experiences and some of the things we've seen. So, Duncan, just very top line, I'm sure there's a lot of people on the call who know what a joint business plan is, but talk us through from your perspective, why is it important and what is a joint business plan?
Well, if I go in the AI world and kind of reinforce through Copilot what I thought, a joint business plan or a JBP, from what we'll go for from now on, is a strategic collaboration between a supplier and a retailer to align on shared goals, drive mutual growth, improve performance across key areas. It's a roadmap that outlines how both parties will work together over a defined period, which is typically a financial year. So I think a really nice kind of summary and definition there, and I'd really emphasize a lot of the kind of collaborative language. It's shared goal, it's mutual growth, it's working together. So this isn't a one-way kind of transactional relationship. It's both businesses coming together. You can kind of see the key components. So some of the key components that make up a JBP there. So you've got your shared objectives. These could be revenue growth targets, market share expansion, category development, or sustainability targets. You've got your strategic initiatives. So things like promotions, new product launches, merchandising plans, or digital campaigns. You've got your commercial terms. So that could be agreements on pricing, investment levels, trade spends, kind of anything on shopper engagement, your performance metrics, which should be your KPIs to track, sales uplift, distribution gains, margin. Your timeframes and your milestones are really important. So how are you going to review? Do you have checkpoints mapped in? Do you have like a calendar planned out? And then your roles and responsibilities. So the real onus here is it's clear ownership from both businesses to ensure kind of smooth execution of the JBP. Why it matters? Well, a good JBP, I'm going to say that word a lot in the next 30 minutes, should strengthen relationships by fostering transparency and trust. It should improve planning, drive efficiency, and ultimately it should give the shopper a better experience. And that's what we should be always keeping in mind. The consumer, that end shopper, should always come first. I mean, a quick point here that no JBP in my experience is ever the same, because no kind of retailer supplier relationship is the same, even within the company. So I'd love to give you a framework or a tool which everyone could follow, which would kind of spit out, really collaborative joint business plans. But from my experience, everyone is different. The key is you've got to be flexible, you've got to be creative, and you've always got to be evolving with the market dynamics. If you even think of a JBP that's a year old, well, a year ago, Donald Trump wasn't elected yet. So you can see how quickly the world is moving, and you've got to move with the times.
Nice. And I like that you spoke about the flexibility about joint business plans that completely align. Even two similar businesses within the same retailer will have completely different discussions. And I think also what's quite important is that a joint business plan is effectively almost like a relationship wrapper. Pretty much anything can go into it. You can get as creative as you like. And I think that's a really nice thing that you mentioned. There's a whole load of different levers you can pull in order to bring that collaborative growth. And we've kind of had a bit of a discussion before this, Duncan. We split the joint business plan, I guess, up into three different parts. There's going to be a lot of people on the call from a range of different departments, marketing, sales, of course, account management, because of the nature of this conversation, but also a lot from RGM. So maybe just with all of that in mind, talk us through the three different stages of the JBPs.
Well, I'll touch on them quickly here, and then we'll go into some more detail, obviously, in the next 30 minutes or so. So first one, preparation, and this is by far the most important one for me. It's got the kind of biggest size of the chart, and we'll go into a lot more detail on what we mean by preparation, because I think it's quite a simple word, but there's so much complexity that falls underneath it. That second point is negotiation. For me, negotiation, has to focus on long-term sustainable growth. That's the key bit. I think it's much easier to do a good annual deal. Sometimes you feel like you've got one up on a customer, or you've got, a 20-30% sales uplift or a profit delivery. But when it comes to lapping that deal, it's often very hard. And if the deal isn't built on, good mutual terms, and a few things fall down, again, when you've got to come back to a JBP the second year, it's going to be a very difficult, challenging conversation. And then that last point, execution, is where I think a lot of people need to focus on a bit more. Again, you can do a deal, but it's all about bringing that to life over the coming months and years, making sure you're on top of it, having the regular check-ins, having, clear accountability, and really staying collaborative. You shouldn't kind of do a JBP, do a deal, wait a year, and then kick off again kind of in 9 months' time. For me, I talk to my guys a lot about an always-on approach. You should always be asking questions, always be thinking about it, always planning. We're not going to touch on negotiation and execution anymore today in this talk. I'm sure you guys could do a separate negotiation and execution webinar, because they warrant their own kind of time and attention. So we'll really focus there on the preparation side of it and some kind of scenario planning and the different kind of variables that fall into that.
Yeah, thanks, Duncan. And I think just to kind of build on your point, especially from a negotiation point of view, both sides, it's an important point. And I'm sure you and I have both been in a situation where actually negotiations have gone on a little bit too long, kind of rolled into the year and kind of stopped the execution part of thing from happening. And there's quite a lot of emphasis put on getting the negotiations right. But actually, if you think about it, you really, really, really need a strong preparation part as well. And for that, and I know there's going to be a lot of people in RGM on the call, from an account management point of view, as much as possible for the account manager to be able to lean on their RGM team and also the tools that they're using and just their general preparation to help you really get ready for your joint business plans. That's something that's super, super important. I think something that is, yeah, the reason why we're going to focus on that in particular in this part here. And I know that diving into that preparing for success part, we've got three different sections, if you like. So yeah, maybe give us a little bit of an insight into those three different sections as part of the preparing for success. Sorry.
So the cross-functional effort here, for me, this is all about this shouldn't be a commercial exercise, solely a commercial one, or solely a commercial responsibility. I think the key is the closer that you can work internally with your different functions, and the closer they can each work externally with their kind of relevant stakeholders, the much more impact and effectiveness you'll have. You should always consider your kind of vertical relationships, your top to top, but actually for me, more important, your kind of horizontal ones we talk about. So we talk about the six relationships, commercial, marketing, supply, ops, category insights, and obviously RGM play, a bigger and bigger role in that, in making sure those six relationships, six relationships are kind of firing on all cylinders, and that's really the key to solid foundations.
Nice. And kind of just jumping on that, and with Jonathan's help here, a question that Duncan and I were pretty curious about, sorry, to the wider audience. In terms of whether you're an account manager or in the RGM team or whatever function you're a part of, from your experience on a scale of 1 to 5, so 1 being maybe the least collaborative, 5 being very collaborative, how cross-functional would you say your joint business planning process is?
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, you already read the question, and you do not have to type this in the chat because we actually have a poll prepared that I will launch now. And as you already shared the question, I think everybody joining by phone will have understood it. We now have a rating scale from 1 to 5, so please indicate from very low to very high the cross-functional collaboration on your current joint business planning process. And then I'll share the results in a couple of seconds with all of you. We are at 50% participation rate. So if we can get to 60, that would be amazing. 55. Okay, so please lock in your final choice. And let me end the poll now and present the results, sharing the results now. From top to bottom, 1 to 5, a perfect normal distribution. Adam, Duncan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, super interesting. I mean, it kind of makes sense, and I guess it's somewhat relative to what you would expect, a good amount of collaboration is. But yeah, I mean, for sure, it'd be amazing if we can start doing a bit more just collaboratively, or it's just RGM departments or account management departments to move those 3s into 4s and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's probably what I'd expect. What about you, Duncan?
Same thing. I think it's one of those things we'd always probably like to do more of.
Mm,
But it's always kind of in the middle or to the bottom of the to-do list. So I think if everyone can find a little bit more time, that extra 5% does really have a massive impact when you're aligned going into your conversations with your customer, and we'll touch on that a bit more in the
yeah.
coming kind of slides.
Agreed. And I guess that kind of shows that from maybe an account management perspective, lean on your teams. And if you're an RGMer or anyone else, feel free to reach out to your account management team. They might be quite busy, so feel free to put yourself in front of them to really help with that collaborative joint business planning approach. So anyway, Duncan, back to the presentation. So cross-functional effort, completely understand. So how about planning? Sorry, understanding, sorry.
Yeah, so for understanding, yeah, and we'll touch on those points in the next slide a bit more, but my kind of challenge to everyone here would be your goal should be to know your category and products better than any of your counterparts. You have more time normally than they do, so that's what you should really try and champion. I think, as a bit of an analogy for understanding, understanding is a bit like building the foundations of a house. The more you know and the more you understand about all the different parts of your customer's business, the more avenues you'll explore and the deeper and the larger foundations to build on. So if you want a big house, if you want to be really successful, you need the most solid foundation. So you have to understand everything you possibly can about their business and about yours. And then scenario planning for me, that's the real fun one. That's when you get all your different levers, all your different variables. You start attaching, value towards them. You look at your value, perceived value, customers' value. You can start kind of ranking them and prioritizing them, getting internal alignment, and that's really planning. When you get into JBP and you get to negotiation, what's move one, what's move two, what second guessing what you think your customer is going to want, and all those kind of stuff.
Nice. And especially we'll come on to the understanding bit in a second. You'll talk us through it in a bit more detail. And the scenario planning part, as you said, is the exciting part where you can really start putting things into practice and understanding how you're going to win and I guess effectively get that collaborative growth. And we've got quite a nice, slide with a few of our examples of what we've done from our planning perspective that we thought has worked quite well, and maybe some of the learnings from that process, to share with the audience. So again, jumping in and splitting those two things up, so understanding and scenario planning. From the understanding point of view, you've got a couple of really nice, I guess, analogies here or graphs, which can really help, I guess, account managers, but also the RGM teams who are involved in this with their understanding of their customers. So talk us through the pestle analysis and the SWOT analysis.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this, but as you say, I think these are great tools and kind of frameworks for when you are working cross-functionally to do a big brainstorming session, get everything down on a piece of paper, start moving it around and really start thinking about the best approach. So a pestle analysis is a tool used to kind of understand the external macro factors that could impact an organization. So starting kind of very top line, and it should kind of help you identify potential opportunities in threats in a broader landscape. You can kind of see what the different buckets to think about there mean. So political factors, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. The next one is a SWOT analysis. So this is when you can start funneling down a bit more into more specifics with you and your customer. So a SWOT analysis can help you identify, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths, often internal attributes that give you an advantage over your competitors. Weaknesses would place your business at a disadvantage. Opportunities, things that you as a business could exploit. And threats, obviously, normally external factors that could cause trouble or harm. So, both these are really good tools to get thinking, to check in every 3 months, 6 months, make sure you're aware of everything going on. And, things like government legislation, duty rates, you probably need to consider, a bit more often, especially in such a fast-paced world at the moment, and how that's going to impact your market over the short term and the longer term.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the customers that we work with at the moment, especially things like tariffs and the increasing price of cacao, coffee, all these different things, it's super, super relevant to be aware of and to plan. And I guess then going a little bit further into the understanding point of view, we kind of split it into three different buckets in particular that you really need to be on top of before you get into your joint business plans.
Exactly that. So if you talk about those foundations we're trying to build, if you think of that, then as I say, there's three really nice channels that you can categorize this into. So your retailer intelligence, or I look at it, your kind of customer intelligence. So I'll ask a few questions here, hopefully to promote some or provoke some thinking. Do you know your contacts' aims? Do you know their objectives for the JBP for the year? Do you know their bosses? Do you know your customers' kind of the company's long-term aims? Do they report them in financial documents or in press releases? Do you have a good understanding of how they're performing in the market? Is revenue up, but profit might be down? Are they winning market share, losing market share? What are they trying to do about that? How are consumers interacting within your customer? Are they losing shoppers? So really, this bit is all about understanding your customer as much as possible, because the more you understand, obviously, the more relevant and the better, more efficient, more effective you can make your proposals. Your manufacturer insights is, for me, all about my Pernod Ricard insights, so me understanding my own business. Do you have a tool, or we have master files, we call them, which tracks performance and all the different touch points of your business? I think it's really important to have one of these in your financial year, but you also need to make sure you have one in the customer financial year, so you understand, their point of view and from where they're kind of coming from. Have you kind of optimized your promotional plan on each product? I think is something we should constantly be assessing. Obviously, RGM plays such a fundamental role in that. Have we trialed some stuff out? If not, what can we propose that's a bit different? Are you aware of kind of changes in your competition? And have you kind of scenario planned how you might need to react based on some recent moves? And I think a really important one is when you have done that work, make sure you've got the internal alignment and support that if you do need to react, you can be really agile and move quite quickly. So yeah, manufacturer all about knowing your own business. And then the category insight, that's all about, what's happening from a trend perspective in the short and long term, in your category. So for me in spirits, but also in my subcategories. So what's happening globally in tequila, what's happening in the UK in tequila, and therefore based on that, what am I doing about it, with any kind of customers I'm working with. Obviously, you want to talk about categories that are in growth, because that's where the consumer will want more choice. So probably more space on shelf or more space on the back bar, and that's probably what your customer is going to be wanting to talk about as well. Versus, categories there's pressure or are declining. I think it's a really nice summary at the bottom of this slide here. So I'll just read it. The strongest JBPs are grounded in shared insight. The better you understand both sides' realities, the easier it becomes to move from negotiation to collaboration, which is really what it's all about.
And Duncan, something you actually said to me as part of the discussions in this, which really hit home, was you said you should not really or should never really be in a position where you come to the discussions with your retailers and be surprised by anything that's being said, whether it's something about what they want or something that they are aiming or aspiring to have, or from a category perspective, you should be there and not be surprised by anything. And that all comes as part of the understanding and yeah, planning, I guess, if you like, the planning process. And speaking a little bit more about planning, so we spoke about, our preparation is split into two. It's understanding and it's scenario planning. And this is the one that you said that, is the fun part, and it really is. It's the part where you can really start to model all the different levers that are available to you in order to achieve yours and your retailers' collaborative goals. So whether that be price, promotion, mix, NPD, all these different things. And we've got some nice examples to speak about on the next slide, I think, from Duncan and I's experience that you can really lean on. And I think definitely from an RGM perspective, this is the really, really key part where the RGM team can really come in and help with the joint business planning. So also as part of that, what's really important, and I mention it quite a lot, is the just trying to not leave money on the table. And a really important part of that is kind of like accounting for a cannibalization. And the reason being is because if you are introducing, say, a new product to market as part of your joint business plan, you might have planned that you're making, let's say, 2 million in revenue because of this. But actually, in reality, due to cannibalization, which you haven't captured correctly, you're actually only making 1 million. And as a result, 1 million is being left on the table. So being able to factor in cannibalization and really get quite an accurate and precise understanding of what you are planning, of the levers you are pulling, is super, super important. Balancing ambition with reality. Sure, you can want every single product to be introduced, every single promotional space. In reality, that's not the case. So although you might have an ambitious plan as part of your JBP, there's nothing wrong with that. Do make sure it's grounded in reality and something that is collaborative. And Duncan, you mentioned this near the beginning, enable an always on planning. So although you've created your plan at the beginning, make sure that when you're executing it, you're constantly checking and evaluating how successful it's been. And the last thing at the bottom, which is again very important, which I touched on, is the precision in this is absolutely critical. The more accurate your plans can be, the more accurate your financial planning is of the levers you're planning on pulling can be, the better your JBP is going to be, and the more likely you are to hit your financial goals. Awesome. So I guess, Duncan, now just talking about that specifically, and this is going to be something that's absolutely not unfamiliar to a lot of the people on the call from the RGM teams, and of course for the other departments as well. But we've kind of selected four of the levers, the main levers that we kind of feel like we've leaned on the most from a joint business planning perspective. Sorry, just to reiterate though, you can really put in anything in the joint business plan. You know, if we put in things which encourage recycling, like bottle collections, all these random things, just to really engage consumers and engage the retailers. You can really think very, very much outside the box here. But in terms of more RGM levers, these are the four that we really thought were quite relevant. So maybe Duncan, you can start off with the first one. This is actually, funnily enough, maybe people would expect this or wouldn't expect this, but this is the one that you and I always get the most excited about during joint business planning, the NPD and mix lever.
For sure, I think, coming from the UK market, UK consumers love NPD, they love innovation, they want to be inspired. From a premium spirits perspective, there's obviously premium price points. So you need to make sure you're keeping people engaged and excited, as I said. So NPD is a fantastic opportunity to do that. From a kind of JBP and commercial perspective, obviously, if you can increase the number of products your customer takes, that's one of the highest value levers you can pull because it's all incremental sales. So it's normally one when you do your scenario planning that, getting NPD listed or getting a new listing is normally at, kind of top of the value rankings for you. I think it's really important here to pause because you should always put yourself in your customer shoes and your consumer shoes. So whilst it might look amazing for you because it's all new business, you have to think, is your NPD more exciting and inspiring than the product it will replace in your customer? What role does it play in their wider range? Does it make commercial sense? Will it drive footfall margin, offer a different format choice? And one thing we can probably, spend a bit more time on, or at least from my experience, is what's the longer term strategy behind NPD? Is it a 6-month wig when it's gone, or is it going to have significant investment over the next couple of years? As a bit of a strategic big bet in growth categories. So, yeah, NPD is one that we always discuss quite a lot.
Yeah, and
The
you kind
next
of
kind
touched
of
on it. Sorry, go
yeah,
for it.
I was just going to say that I'll cover mix as well quickly because again, let's take 2 secs. But in terms of a mix perspective, obviously all the different products that everyone sells will have different levels of profitability for you and for your customer. Really simple one here, but obviously if you can sell more of a profitable product and you'd be collaborative with that on your customer, it could unlock funding to look at a different opportunity potentially in a different part of the deal. So yeah, through NPD and mix, normally you've got some pretty high value propositions to discuss.
Yeah, nice. And I was just going to touch on because you pretty much touched on it already, but the triple win. So if you're introducing the product, making sure it's tapping into a consumer need, it's the right product for the consumer, it's going to grow your retailer's sales and also naturally going to grow your own sales. Just from a bit of my own experience when it comes to NPD, it could be particularly useful when negotiations come to a standstill. So I had a situation where two of my retailers were merging and there was a bit of a negotiation over the prices that we paid for the products. There was quite a lot of fierce negotiation, as you would imagine, and rightly so. But it got to a position where we had a gap where the retailers still wanted us to fund a certain amount. And in order to close that gap, instead of continuing the negotiation, we identified certain strategic pieces of NPD that we could introduce to the market that would actually give us that revenue that they were looking for in return, but also grow their P&L as a result as well. So it can be a really nice, as I mentioned here, kind of a way to bridge the gap if negotiations have got to a certain point. But again, it comes down to that ability to be able to really accurately plan and understand and predict, financially speaking, how much that NPD is going to bring you. Sorry. And again, that's where the RGM teams can really come in to show the account managers, look, we predict that if you introduce this new product to market, this is how many units you would sell. This is the right pricing strategy for it so that you can really implement it correctly. Awesome. From a promotional strategy point of view, so there's quite a lot of times this is quite relevant. So it's often the case during joint business plans that retailers will change strategies. So potentially they might decide that actually to compete, they want to move to an everyday low price strategy, or instead of going from a high low strategy to maintain a bit better profit margins, they'll go to a mid-low strategy. There's a range of different avenues for them to effectively suggest to you. What I would say from this perspective, and again with you, Duncan, is just again sounding a little bit like a broken record here, but yeah, this is where the RGM team can really help to make sure that we've modeled that effectively, and actually maybe switching to the EDLP, if that's what the retailer wants, isn't necessarily the right thing for you to do. So instead of just going in there and collaborating entirely, which is, normally the right thing to do, perhaps there's a middle ground to do something which works for both parties rather than switching immediately to EDLP. And again, that's something that the RGM team can help with in particular.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. You always got to have to think in your customer's shoes. I think the other thing that popped in my mind when you look at promotional strategy is making sure that your products, are on promotion at the right time of year, in the right space. So obviously for us in premium spirits, Christmas is super important from a gifting perspective. So, it's working collaboratively with your customer, and being creative, with everything you can do in the JBP to make sure that you've got the right products in the right space at the right times of year.
Just to kind of build on that, so a really big part of a joint business plan is effectively a marketing budget, if you like, or a budget which goes towards things like not just marketing spend, but your additional visibility, promoting or encouraging or improving, sorry, the visibility of your products in store. So, for example, you could have a product on gondola end, you could have a product on display, etc. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with this. But one thing which is, I guess, the golden ticket is understanding for the amount that you're paying for that space, what are you getting in return? What is the uplift? What's the true uplift from putting your product on the gondola end? Because it might be a great thing to do from a unit perspective, but actually when you look at the true return on investment compared to how much it costs, then actually maybe you don't necessarily want to do that. And actually just a smaller display area is actually going to give you better results. So it's then comes back to understanding what your objectives are, what your goals are, obviously, of course, what your retailer goals are, but then again, leaning on certain tools or RGM teams that can really help you understand what each space gives you in terms of the uplift. And I guess also one of the things that Pernod taught me was fish where the fish are. I guess if that makes sense in this situation, which is if you have a high selling, high profitable product, make sure that's the one that's getting the most feature space, because that's the one that's going to really sell a lot and yeah, I guess hit your goals and also your customers' goals, but also the consumer goals as well.
So coming on to distribution, this for me is all about fair share. So do your products have their fair share, across all the different marketplaces that you could operate in? So from an on-trade perspective, your customer might have cocktail bars, pubs, restaurants, and there's, different approaches, different solutions for each one of those. From, an off-trade grocery perspective, you might have convenience stores, online, in-store, which again, can have different ranges. Within grocers, you might have different levels of distribution, and you might have affluent clusters and a whole lot of different things going on. So yeah, this is all about making sure that from your distribution perspective, when you compare yourself to the rest of your categories, do you have your fair share? And obviously the category and the RGM teams play a kind of fundamental role here.
Nice. And price pack architecture, or not price pack architecture, price architecture. That was something that you also spoke about to me before the meeting as well.
Yeah, I won't talk too much about, price increases. I think probably everyone's well versed in those. I think there's just an interesting thing to consider here that, price can go down as well as up. And I guess the fundamental point I'd make is this is where you've got to be creative in your approach. If it, can unlock greater value elsewhere in the deal to drop the price of a product or a brand, as long as you're looking at deal in totality, I think that's the flexibility and creativity that your customer will really appreciate. And that's when it's a good example of something that might not want to do. You got to get the internal alignment, but actually, that can have really set you up for long-term success.
I really like that. It's a bit more of a holistic look, that although we may be dropping the price of one, using one lever here, dropping the price, but actually in order to do that, we're introducing a new product to market to get that across the line. What's the combined impact? And the combined impact is going to lead to a net positive effect. So being able to, yeah, action that is also a very nice example as well. Awesome. So that's kind of a little look at the different levers that we've been speaking about that you can pull on. I know that obviously due to the conversations that we're having, and especially being from Buynomics, we're very much aware that there's a lot of AI tools out there that are here to help RGM teams with what they're doing. But especially from your perspective, I think for everyone on the call, it would be really interesting to understand in terms of AI in RGM, how do you think it can be well utilized to help different people with their joint business planning?
I think there's a kind of overall point here that I think everyone's pretty effective at looking backwards, taking insight from looking backwards in your analysis and making some pretty good proposals. I think what, we all need to get better at, and what you guys are fantastic at, is all the new data and the technology that's available. How can we be a bit better at, forward forecasting, in kind of modeling out different scenarios? So yeah, that's definitely something that's kind of a live conversation in my head. On just the points we've got there, I'll just elaborate on a little bit. Precision at scale. I think precision is really the key word for me here, where RGM can play such a key role. The more accurate we can get our modeling, the easier we can build trust with our customer, and the more collaborative we can be. If you're the person that is only getting it right, is being really collaborative, what often happens is you're the first person that gets the phone call when they need something. And if you can get yourselves into that place where you're, the first phone call, the first opportunity, that's a fantastic place to be. Always on insight, in a world that's so volatile, it's really important to be agile and be able to react quickly. So really important. Triple win outcomes, all about being led by the end consumer as much as you possibly can, always putting yourself in your customer's shoes. So really important to quantify all that kind of stuff. And then really confidence negotiations. If you've done the 3 points previous, you should have real clarity and confidence in your short-term and longer-term planning. And as we touched on, hopefully with no surprises in there as well. So yeah, it's got a key role going forward.
Thanks, Duncan. Awesome. And just to really wrap up, because I do want to save some time for questions. So I guess from our perspective, in terms of the key takeaways, negotiations can get you so far, and it's very important. But of course, collaborative and mutual growth should always be a really important goal, and something you shouldn't underestimate. Preparation, super key. I'd say 90% of the JBP is won during the preparation stage, getting that right, knowing that you're getting to the table with your retailers, knowing everything you need to know, knowing exactly what they are looking to get out of the conversations and the joint business plan as well, will put you in a really good position. And also quantifying with precision. So kind of what Duncan's mentioned previously, that if you're pulling certain levers, get a really clear understanding of what those levers are going to give you, financially speaking, in return. So yeah, that's pretty much everything we had. So yeah, Jonathan, should I stop sharing and maybe we can do some questions? Is that the best way to go about this?
Yes, that's a perfect way. And thank you so much for the presentation. Up until now, I've chatted with a lot of participants, and I've written down the questions from the audience that I want to share with you. First question is on one of the last slides. How can manufacturers and retailers practically use AI-driven scenario planning to identify those win-win opportunities before the negotiation even begins? So talking about the preparation, maybe you can have your take on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, Duncan, if you want. So I guess scenario planning is a really important part of it. There are, as you've probably seen, many different ways in which you can come to the joint business plan with a range of different levers that you want to pull on. So I'd really what I really implore is leaning on the RGM team, and for the RGM team out there to really help your account managers plan for each different RGM lever that you're looking to execute in the JBP, and make sure, as I've kind of mentioned quite a few times before, that you're using all the tools that you can to effectively really understand what it is that's coming out of it, because then when you understand what the results will be financially speaking, you can prioritize what are the ones that are going to be best for you, but also best, of course, for your retailers and the consumers as well. I don't know if, Duncan, you've got anything else to say on top of that.
I just say some couple kind of examples of the UK market, how when things are happening, if it's government legislation example, I think it's so useful to really, it's so helpful for your customers to see the impact on sales. So a good example in the UK, minimum unit pricing came into Scotland recently. How has that impacted sales, and therefore what's the long-term, impact in Scotland and how we should react? If you think of, we've got a budget coming up in a couple of months. Are they going to increase duty rates in line with inflation? If they do, what does a 4% inflationary increase mean for pricing and mean for our sales? And based on all of that, what should we be doing with our customers? So I think there are always things you should be looking at and exploring. And as I said, if you can become the customer who's leading that insight from a category and RGM perspective with your customer, you're going to be in a fantastic position to unlock the opportunities that all these things always throw out.
Yeah, thanks. I hope that answered the question. I have another one for you, Duncan. You mentioned that the crucial cross-functional alignment earlier. What's worked best in your experience to get the cross-functional teams pulling in the same direction during the preparation based on your experiences?
Yeah, I think there's probably two nice things you can do here. I think it's having regular check-ins, cross-functionally, so making sure you catch up probably at least once a month, if not more, to see what's happening in your customer, to see if the marketing guys are speaking to each other, to see what's happening from a category perspective. And a lot of stuff we talk about is storytelling and have a consistent story. So it's really important that that story is from everyone and everyone plays a role in it. The second element I definitely encourage is some of those, tools and frameworks like the pesto, the SWOT analysis, regularly getting everyone to catch up and having a bit of a brainstorming session is so valuable. And actually, a lot of the value I find is from, when different teams with different perspectives say, why are we doing it this way? Why have we done it? And often if you ever answer something saying, oh, because that's the way we've always done it, you should definitely have a look at it again. So I find those really useful tools.
Right. Yeah, I can totally agree. And then one from Karen that also might be a little bit tricky, but based on your experience when it comes to preparing for a joint business plan, what matters more, the data and the scenarios or the human relationships being built?
Well, with RGM on the call, I know what I should answer, but from working for Pernod Ricard and what I said at the start, it's pretty tough, tricky one. I think there's a fine balance. For us as a business, we very much value relationships. And me personally, I'd say if you don't have the relationship, it's much harder to get everything else away. But obviously, the quality of that relationship is likely to come down from the quality of your data and the conversations you have. So you've really got to have both, but I would encourage you to make as much time as possible to see your customers in person. In my world, you want to take them out, entertain them. We're lucky that we can do that. But the more you do that, the more understanding you have, the bigger the foundations, the bigger the house.
Yeah, completely aligned. I think it's a really nicely structured question because the answer is quite obviously bit of both, but that's it is very thought provoking in terms of actually really clarifying what are the two aspects that you really need to ace before your joint business plan. So yeah, very nice question.
Okay, great. Maybe a last one live, and the rest we answer one-to-one or one-to-many later on from Kirsten. How do you get account sales teams to learn more about more on or towards an RGM department? We are a 1.5-year-old RGM department trying to grow our voice, which perfectly aligns with another question of what advice you would give from the Q&A section.
Yeah, I mean it's a very very good question, and Duncan's probably been in a similar situation, but I've worked in different companies where the RGM team has been a range of different maturities. I think from my perspective, and I know that you say trying to grow your voice, it's for me it's about just really highlighting the worth that you can bring from an RGM department. I think from an account management perspective, sometimes when I was an account manager, I was building my pricing strategy, my promo strategy, just using Excel spreadsheets, looking at EPOS data, sellout data. And then when I executed it and it came round to it, I didn't get the results I wanted. And in reality, it's because I wasn't doing as rigorous analysis as the RGM teams could do. So absolutely getting in front of them and just showing the different things you're working on them, the processes of how you work on them. I think that in itself is super valuable. And, any good account manager from that position would very much welcome that support from your team. So that would be my suggestions. What about you, Duncan?
I completely agree. Maybe some small points to add. I think a kind of internal alignment, from the more senior stakeholders is super important to make sure the messaging is filtering down. And then case studies. I love a case study. As Adam said, if you can demonstrate, we've done this and we've looked at this and actually we can make an extra X amount of money, it would be a silly account manager that doesn't then go and have a conversation about how you can tackle that together.